everyone, welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo Story. Pakistan needs dollars and it needs them soon to prevent a possible economic collapse. For the last 10 days, a team of the International Monetary Fund was in Pakistan to work out the release of over $1 billion of financial aid that's extremely critical for the country at this point in time. The visiting delegation has left without a concluding statement. The cash-strapped country is facing major economic challenges which have worsened with food security concerns due to floods, political chaos, and worsening security situation. The country's foreign exchange reserves have fallen to $2.9 billion. Pakistan reportedly says it has agreed with the IMF on conditions to release about $1.1 billion in financial aid, critical to escape an economic collapse, but no agreement has been reached yet. Country's Finance Minister Ishaq Dar has said that the payout was delayed due to routine procedures. He said taxes amounting to 170 billion rupees would be imposed. Now, that is the situation that's developing in Pakistan. To discuss this, we're joined by an eminent panel. We're joined from India by Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, who is a defense expert. Welcome to the show. From Pakistan, we're joined by moeen nawazish, who's a journalist. He joins us from Pakistan. Also from Pakistan, we're joined by Ahmad Pansota, who's a lawyer. He joins us from Pakistan. And we'll also be joined by Achal Malhotra, who's a former diplomat. He also joins us. The question that we are asking is that, is Pakistan heading the Sri Lanka way? We saw what happened in Sri Lanka some time ago. If I may start with you, moeen nawazish, how is the situation in Pakistan right now? The economic situation, we've been hearing for some time that the country is in some sort of an economic crisis. Is it improving or is it going from bad to worse?
Yeah, I'll try to answer your question by addressing, is Pakistan going the Sri Lanka way? I think we're a long way off from the Sri Lanka way, especially with this IMF meeting. We have gotten the MEFP, which is the framework for economic policies. And you said in your opening remarks that, no concluding statement was given. The IMF did issue a press release, so I believe there's some prior actions that need to be done, some taxes that need to be levied, because this program since 2019 has been in and out. The reviews kept getting delayed. So I think what the IMF wants now is a lot of front loading of the adjustments and the things that need to be done. But Sri Lanka was down to $29 million when it defaulted. Pakistan still has $2.9 billion in reserves, and the next big payment that is going to come up is going to be in June 2023. So there is some breathing space, but the expectation of the markets right now is that this agreement needs to be done within this month. Otherwise it'll be very concerning. We've seen the currency markets have been muted. The stock market did react negatively today, but the currency market has been muted. We didn't see like a huge drop in the value of the rupee. We'll see how what happens on Monday. But the other thing that we also have to note now is that today the electricity tariff the price has been increased, and some other actions have been taken, which kind of signify that the gap that exists, or the prior actions that need to be done, are being done.
Right. Before we go to our other guests, let's hear what Pakistan Finance Minister Ishaq Dar had to say after the 10-day meeting with the IMF officials in Pakistan.
हमारे तमाम जो मामलात हैं जो तय पा गए, और आपको पता है कि ये 10 दिन एक्सटेंसिव डिस्कशंस थी, वो पावर के ऊपर भी थी, वो गैस सेक्टर के ऊपर भी थी, वो फिस्कल साइड पे भी थी, वो मॉनेटरी साइड पे भी थी, और इसमें हमारे स्टेट बैंक के गवर्नर भी इन्वॉल्व थे, मेरे अपने जो पूरे साथी हैं टीम में वो भी, और दूसरे डिविजन्स भी, पेट्रोलियम, अपना एफबीआर, पावर सेक्टर, सब लोगों ने अपने अपने जो उनका हिस्से का जो कमिटमेंट्स और फ्यूचर रोड मैप था उन्होंने डिस्कस किया, और फिर इवेंचुअली जो फाइनल उनके कुछ पॉइंट्स थे या इश्यूज कह लें वो कल हमें जब दोपहर में मिले तो कल रात तक हमने हर चीज को म्यूचुअली एग्री करके तय कर लिया.
Achal, Malhotra, do you think that Pakistan will be able to overcome this crisis given that there are tough conditions that have been imposed by the IMF, although the government says that it has reached to some sort of an agreement with the IMF? If you can unmute. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and particularly my co-panelists from Pakistan. I would, at the outset, like to say that India definitely would like to see Pakistan emerging, fit and fine from this crisis, because anything going haywire in Pakistan is bound to have a negative impact elsewhere in the region, also on India. So we wish you all the best. Now, coming to the main point, well, by the acknowledgement of everybody in Pakistan, the Pakistan is indeed going through a very, very difficult time. And Pakistan's foreign minister himself has admitted that the kind of conditions which IMF is imposing are really painful. They are stringent. And asking a country to impose 117 million rupees of additional taxes in a situation when inflation is high and things are going out of control. My only fear is that if all the conditions are met and implemented the way IMF is wanting, it may not lead to unrest, the popular unrest in the country. The kind of thing we saw in Sri Lanka. But yes, if there is a bailout, if there is a timely bailout, the country may carry on. But I think it's not a good situation for any country to wait for bailouts time after time. And this is not the first time that Pakistan is, finding itself in a situation like this and is looking forward to some assistance or loans and the IMF bailout coming to their way. How long is this going to go? Unless they realize that they've set their priorities right. I believe they are refusing for any cut in the defense budget, which again shows that their priorities are not they are not focusing on the right priorities. So even if, and my personal observation is that all said and done, Pakistan unfortunately has some nuisance value for the rest of the world. It's a nuclear power. I even may go to the extent of saying the credibility is not very high. Credentials are not very high in this regard. Epicenter of terrorism. Then there is, of course, Islamic solidarity. So if things really are going to get out of control, I'm sure somebody else other than IMF may also come to the rescue of the country, because nobody would like Pakistan to collapse and be a failed state. But if the burden is increased on the population, unrest is possible, and it can lead to chaotic situation and conditions in the country. But I wish all the best to
you mentioned about the burden on the population. In fact, we had that soundbite as well of the finance minister when he says that more taxes will be imposed on the ordinary people. So perhaps to save the state, the people have to bear the brunt of the tax. Already there have been escalation of fuel prices and other commodities, and now there will be more taxes. If we can play up that soundbite.
इस पॉलिसी जो पैकेज है इसमें आपने भी पढ़ा होगा, मैं भी पढ़ता रहा हूं. कोई साथी 800 अरब लिखता रहा है, कोई 700 लिखता रहा है, कोई 600 लिखता रहा है. 170 अरब के जो फिस्कल वेजेस हमें टैक्सेस लगाने होंगे, और हमारी हत्तुल इम्कान यही कोशिश है कि कोई ऐसा टैक्स ना लगे जो कि डायरेक्टली गरीब, इनडायरेक्ट तो असर होता है लेकिन डायरेक्टली किसी भी आम कॉमन आदमी के ऊपर बोझ ना बने या उसके ऊपर उसका असर ना हो. तो हमारे जो फाइनल नंबर आपस में तय हुए वो 170 बिलियन है, एज अपोज टू रिपोर्टेड बार बार कोई 600, कोई 700, कोई 800, अपने अपनी मर्जी से. वो हम शौक है हमें कि जल्दी जल्दी हम कह दें कि डेडलॉक हो गया, खत्म हो गया, सारा कुछ जा रहे हैं, अल्लाह हाफिज फॉरएवर. वो ऐसी बात नहीं है. पाकिस्तान के इंटरेस्ट भी मेरी रिक्वेस्ट होगी हम सामने रखें, क्योंकि ये हमारे मुल्क के इंटरेस्ट में नहीं है. मुझे ये एज ए पाकिस्तानी कहने का मेरा फर्ज है कि मैं ये कहूँ कि हम सबको, all of us, we must मेक श्योर कि हम पाकिस्तान के इंटरेस्ट को जरूर सामने रखें.
Ahmed Pansota, the financial stability of a country is always linked to the political stability. But the political situation in the last 10 months in Pakistan has not really helped.
Yes, I think you've raised a very pertinent observation and a question. At the moment, the biggest challenge for IMF, or for that matter, anybody dealing with the sitting government, is the legitimacy that the government has. You see, the government itself, there is the largest political party in Pakistan is at the moment on the roads to sort of sell this narrative that this incumbent government is not there in its proper true spirit and intent, how it should have been there. So that is also something which is seen by the IMF as well, that the people that they're dealing with, they feel that they do not have the exact mandate, both the political and at the same time the governmental mandate to deal with them. So I believe as a precursor to this deal, another important situation can be that a government with proper political legitimacy, people who's got people on their back, should be dealing with IMF at the moment. But however, as the situation is imminent, I believe it has gone far beyond the imposition of 170 billion. It also talks about the fuel prices. It also talks about the subsidies, the removal, and then BISP, the Benazir Income Support Program, allocation of rupees 40 billion there. I think it's a very stringent requirement that the government has to bear. But mind you, even if the government decides to agree and say that these conditions are to be imposed, the next important question is whether the electorate is going to accept that, because one of the largest political parties of Pakistan is on the roads, and they will exploit that situation, and they would want a fresh mandate, be whosoever that political party be. But public is not going to sit silent at what is going to be agreed between IMF. So the next few days for Pakistan are extremely pressing, and I pray, as I think the panelists from India summed it up very well, that first of all, thank you very much for wishing good luck to Pakistan, but at the same time, no country can afford instability in this part of the world. And in the famous words of Charlie Wilson, when he was being sent here for that particular war, and he was told, what is Pakistan? And then when that question was posed, he said that it's Russia, China, India,
Right.
Arabian Sea.
Yes. Yes. General Rakesh Sharma, Ambassador Achal Malhotra raised the important point of the priorities in Pakistan. Is the country still not setting its priorities right? It's passing through one of the worst economic situations in the country. Its foreign exchange reserves have come down to less than $3 billion. Of course, the Pakistani guest told us that it may not be comparable to Sri Lanka, but remember, Pakistan has a huge population, so perhaps it needs to set its priorities right. Mentioned about Achal Malhotra mentioned about the defense budget. That's not going to come down.
Thank you, Zaffar, for inviting me, and hello to all my co-panelists here. The fact of the matter is that this IMF loan comes or doesn't come is not a starting point for structural reform of the macroeconomic issues in Pakistan. It's like having a credit card of one bank, and you have to pay back the credit card of one bank, so you use the credit card of the second bank to pay off the first bank, and thereafter when your first bank is due, you pay off the credit card of second bank. This is not the way the structural reforms are done. You can't take money from A to pay the B, and from B then you pay A. That's not how structural reforms. If Pakistan has to pay up to say $9 to $10 billion from February to June, when this $1.1 billion tranche of IMF is not going to help, because in the next 3 months there will be next consignment, and over 2025, the figure being branded about is about $75 billion to be paid in the course of 3 years. It requires a serious structural reform, macroeconomic structural reform in Pakistan. You can't say that you take money from Saudi Arabia and the diesel in Pakistan is cheaper than the one which is available in UAE and Saudi Arabia. Even now, the diesel in Pakistan is cheaper than that is being sold in India and Bangladesh. So there are serious structural issues which have been persisting for a very long time, which has brought us to this fore. And even if the IMF decides to give this money, and we pray that IMF actually bails out. And this is an old tranche. It's the last IMF 23rd dealings of IMF in which this money has to be paid. If the IMF is not able to, even if they are able to clear it off, how do you settle the longer term issues? Look at the population growth. Even Tunisia sorted out the population growth. Bangladesh sorted out the population growth. The population growth in Pakistan is going way, way above the most countries in the world. The power sector deficit left by PTI government in some figures was $2,300 billion. I mean, that's some kind of money left out. When Musharraf left, it was 100. It's not a issue of just getting IMF loan that would help today, maybe 1 week, maybe 1 month. It requires very serious, broad-based structural reforms in each and every sector to come up to that level that you are able to persist for a longer time. That's the issue.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with the co-panelists. It's a question of public suffering, population suffering. It's a catch-22 situation between what the IMF want and what the people want. People are suffering, so there's a dichotomy out here which has to be addressed.
Ali Moeen Nawazi, structural reforms that are needed. These bailouts from IMF, they are short-term measures. They are not going to help the country in the long run. They make you relief for a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, then you're back to square one. Who is going to make that structural reforms, and when are they going to be done in Pakistan? Please unmute.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of interesting and good arguments have been made. So, yes, so structural reforms are necessary. We need to increase our export base. We need to. Uh, Pakistan, Pakistan's economic crisis stems from essentially a balance of payment crisis and a fiscal crisis where we're borrowing. Well, a lot of countries do, but what we end up doing is that we end up with a balance of payment crisis, and hence we're chasing dollars. So, I mean, part of the things that the IMF conditions are actually some of the structural reforms that are needed, but then that's only going half of the way there. For instance, the circular debt in the power sector was 2,300 billion when PTI left. Imran Khan's government was removed, and it's now reaching 2,600, 2,700, and needs to be brought down. It was around 500 billion rupees, not dollars, 500 billion rupees when when PMLN came into power. So that's one area where structural reforms are needed. The state-owned enterprises, that's where structural reform needed. We have a demographic dividend. 60% of our population is made up of young people. How to harness it? How to increase that productivity? All of those things need to be done. But one thing, the IMF program, it's not just about $1 billion that the IMF is going to give. And most probably what's going to happen is once this IMF program is over, we'll immediately need to get into another IMF program, considering what the funding gap over the next 3 years. But the IMF program, being in the IMF program, actually unlocks additional sources of funding for the country, whether that's from the Asian Development Bank, that's from the World Bank. And Pakistan's debt to GDP ratio still isn't out there. It's around 70%. So there are countries with much higher debt to GDP ratio, but we need to increase taxes. And the whole problem with these subsidies, and when we keep saying it's going to be painful, has been that we've been doling out these subsidies to everyone. So one of the good things that I think the IMF also acknowledged is that, yes, increase targeted subsidies like with the Benazir Income Support Program, increase funding there, but you can't keep subsidizing your elite, and you can't keep subsidizing electricity for people who make lots of money, who can afford, don't pay their fair share of taxes. And I think those are kind of the structural reforms that need to be happen. On the fiscal front, I know it becomes a political issue, when we talk about the defense budget, but it's not that huge that's taking 90% of Pakistan's budget. It's our debt servicing, and the bigger problem is We just need, what Pakistan has failed in increasing the size of the pie over the past decade or so, where it needed that growth. And we've gone through these, and the other problem has been politics. We've gone through these boom and bust cycles. When Imran Khan left, he gave this disastrous petrol subsidy, which caused us to not only leave the IMF program at that time, delayed our reviews, it ate up valuable finances, and then because of the political cost, it took this government some time to decide to raise petrol prices again. And then once, even within this government, the political capital that is needed to do these structural reforms and get back into the IMF program was so great that they ended up removing their own finance minister. So I think for
Right.
Pakistan, the way out needs to be a political consensus on the economy, stop playing politics on the economy, and do the things that need to be done. And there's been this talk about having a charter of economy, having this long-term plan, because without it, it's going to be it's going to be very difficult for Pakistan to keep on borrowing and
Yeah.
not generating its own dollars, not generating within it, not growing its own economy. So I
Yeah.
think these are questions and these are issues that need to be addressed. The IMF program right now, we need the IMF program. There is no
Right.
other way out. We need to clear this balance of payment crisis. But
Right.
uh, and it's not that this IMF program won't avert default. It will, because it will unlock so many other sources of funding.
Right.
But the
Right.
main issue with this, and the reason for one of the reasons for delay of reaching the staff level agreement, has also been, and what the government and IMF have been negotiating, is a staggered approach versus a front end approach. And it seems the IMF is
Right.
not willing to negotiate, and they want everything to be done front ended
So,
because of that trust deficit that's built up.
we'll talk about that trust deficit. In fact, that's a very important point. The trust deficit, not just between the IMF and the government of Pakistan, but also between finance ministers of the same government. We know there was a difference of opinion between Finance Minister Miftah Ismail and the current Finance Minister uh, Ishaq Dar. We'll talk about that, but quickly, Ambassador Achal, Malhotra, how do you see the implications of a collapsing economy in Pakistan on India? India is the immediate neighbor of Pakistan.
Well, I don't think our two economies are linked in a such a manner that in any case we are not having any trade. Officially, we are not having any trade. So there is no direct link, but the other repercussions are there. Instability in our neighborhood is something which must be avoided. And whenever there is a tendency, whenever there are economic choirs, the situation is bad, people are on the verge of revolting. Usually, people in the in the governments or the ruling circles, they tend to take certain measures to divert the attention towards other directions. So, in these circumstances, Pakistan may end up making some adventures towards India, and that's what comes to my mind. But otherwise, if there is a collapse, it's going to be bad for the entire region in one way or the other, as I said in the past also. Otherwise, in economic terms, I don't see much of a reflection on India. Particularly, as I said, we don't have any trade, we don't have any investments, we don't have any, economic interaction. But other possibilities can't be ruled out, and that's which bothers me. Over to you, Zaffar.
Other possibilities, we'll talk about that with General Rakesh Sharma. But Ahmad Pansota, the point that I was mentioning earlier, there's this mistrust between IMF and the government of Pakistan. IMF says you enter into an agreement, then you back out. The government change, and what is the guarantee that the next government will come in and they will abide by what has been, discussed and an agreement reached upon earlier? We're not talking about just the difference of, agreement between the IMF and the government of Pakistan, but also between two finance ministers, Miftah Ismail and Ishaq Dar. They are divergent opinions, and they're saying that Miftah Ismail is saying that a lot of delay was done by the current finance minister. He should have gone to the IMF program right at the outset, but he said that I know how to deal with IMF.
Well, as far as Miftah and Dar's conflict is concerned, I think that is also political. They are from the same political party, but of course, when you replace a finance minister, there is going to be a hue and cry about that. Plus, Dar Saab is supposedly the most, uh, I would say, experienced when it comes to PMLN for them. But you see, the trust deficit that you've spoken about, that's very, very important. And that's basically twofold. First of all, there's trust deficit between IMF and Pakistan, and then Pakistani government and the public that they are supposedly representing. That trust deficit. You see, what happens is that when IMF sees that there is a trench of payment which has been made, and once that payment is made, then the payment is being used to give things or facilities such as subsidies and is being spent at areas which essentially it is not meant for, then of course they have every reason to doubt the government. And the second problem that I had earlier raised as well, that this was initially these talks were initially started off with the previous government, Imran Khan's government. Then it was followed by the regime change, which of course which is very controversial in Pakistan at the moment. And now that's the political government that is dealing with them. So IMF, even if I was in the IMF's position, I would not be absolutely sure whether the person on the other side or the staff or whatever, whosoever, is sincerely getting into this agreement. That's the second problem, the actual trust deficit. And thirdly, one of the panelists had said something in a very, very, I would say, basic way, but that's the problem. I mean, you don't take one loan or one credit card to pay another credit card's loan. That is also in fraud. You need structural reforms. Ali has spoken about these reforms in detail, and I think that's need of the day. We don't spend or we don't invest in those structural reforms. We start and we, on the basis of this payment, we try to make makeshift measures. But in the end, it is all about not the makeshift measures, but the long-term investment and these structural reforms, which is eventually going to pull us out of this. So yes, there is a trust deficit on, I would say, all three sides.
Right. General Rakesh Sharma, Ambassador Achal Malhotra spoke about a diversion. There could be possible, what he said, an adventure. Do you see some sort of a situation like that emerging, possibly perhaps a flare-up at the line of control? We know that the ceasefire has been holding there for a couple of years. Nothing has happened. It's, ceasefire is perfectly holding except for a few incidents. Do you think such sort of a thing can happen given the internal situation in Pakistan?
Yeah, so it's a valid question. And I would like to play the China card before I come to the Pakistan and issues on the line of control. The fact is, if Pakistan is to pay about $30 billion to China, of which about, say, $4 billion were lying cash in Pakistani banks and $6 billion were loaned and $20 billion is invested in CPEC. And China has come in a big way in Gilgit-Baltistan, in mining and many other ways, dams being built across there and power sector all over. So Chinese have got a strong stake in here. They are not providing loans for reasons because they know that's very difficult for the Pakistanis to repay back. And the IMF is anxious, and IMF, I mean Americans are also anxious that the money being paid will be taken off to ward off Chinese loans. So there is a vicious circle between United States and the IMF and the Pakistanis and of course the Chinese, which is a big bugbear around the corner. So what will the Chinese do to prop up the whole thing is a separate issue altogether. Having said that, I agree with what Ambassador Malhotra said. The fact is that, it is historic. It's not new. The ceasefire is held. Ceasefire, which started in Mr. Bajpayee's time, held on for quite some years. Then, of course, it nearly tottered away in this last decade. Thereafter, 2 years ago, the new ceasefire is holding on. It helps out the population, which is largely agricultural based, closer to the border areas to do agricultural productivity, and it helps us in many ways. However, the history proves it that when things go bad way, there is always an agility on part of the forces on the borders to initiate action, to take the mind off this thing. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope there is maturity on part of the new Pakistan military establishment. It doesn't suit them to escalate issues across the line of control or along the international border. We keep hearing these drones bringing in drugs being dropped. Yesterday a drone brought drugs and was caught in Amritsar. So all these issues actually add to some kind of anxiety on part of the international population also, that these things can escalate. So this is the time to require wisdom to control forces so that it doesn't escalate and the ceasefire don't go awry. But the anxiety that it can happen based on historical evidence is there, and it should not, it should be curbed. Having said that, I'll say one more issue. Finally, all that 20 billion is gone into the power sector of Pakistan should have been utilized to earn better manufacturing and create more avenues to earn money. Finally, it's an issue with Pakistan has to earn money, foreign exchange, by manufacturing and exporting, by being competitive in the world. Till the time you get this competitiveness going and start earning steady income in foreign exchange, no foreign tranche and no China or Saudi Development Fund or UAE or Asian Development Bank will come up to that kind of a support. The structural reforms only will make sure Pakistan earns the money which is required to stand on its own feet and sort out the issues.
Yeah, very important points, and we're getting reports from Pakistan that in fact the manufacturing units are shutting because there are no dollars for carrying out those imports, and there are so many containers which are lying there and waiting to be cleared. So clearly, Pakistan needs some structural reforms to get out of the economic crisis that it is currently in. But that's all we have on today's show. Thanks to all our panelists for joining us today. That's all we have on the show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.